that this is something that Mars One might just pull off. And imagine how big the reward is. Imagine that if Mars One would succeed in doing this, I mean, I would be the luckiest man on the planet. So to have such a reward is worth taking a big risk, like investing your money in an almost impossible mission. But I'm a very pragmatic guy at the same time. I would never spend my money or my time on something that I don't fully believe in. So while I know that this is a mission with a project, a company with great risk, I also firmly believe that this is something that we can pull off. And I am working with every fiber in my body to make that happen. I thank you very much. I think we have some time for questions. Yep.
Not so much a question, but you sound like the author of a novel I just read, where the financing of a trip to Mars was done commercially by a rich man, sort of rich, who solicited billionaires to all contribute.
Billionaires Club.
The Billionaires Club to go to Mars. And one of the enticements that he gave them was in the intellectual property arena. And his intellectual property was manufacturing and selling virtual reality systems so that everybody on Earth could go to Mars with the crew. I found it totally realistic.
Yeah, the billionaires is a really interesting idea, and I've talked to someone who knows one of those billionaires and who has a coffee with him every now and then. And I met with this guy with the only purpose of trying to get him to connect me to the billionaire. And of course I didn't say it like that. I'm Dutch, but I'm not that blunt, so I was trying to maneuver around it, and then at some point in time he got me and he said, "Ah, you're trying to have me connect you." And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said it doesn't work that way, because these are people that have accomplished everything, and they want to be in control. So if they want to support your mission, they need to think that it's their idea. At least they need to think it. So the only way to get them to participate, either as a donor because they want it to be Slim City, or as an investor because they want to make it happen and get a return on their investment, they need to hear it from people around them and then come to the conclusion themselves. I don't know if it's true because I don't know so many billionaires that I can check it with, but it sounds like a credible story. So the only thing we can do to try to make this happen is to create a lot of exposure, show steps in the right direction, and wait for the phone call.
Did you say that you were going to put the candidates in a training simulator for 8 years?
No, I think I wasn't very specific on that. They will train for 8 years, but we will have them train in the simulation outpost at least once per year for an undetermined amount of time. So when they go in, they have no idea how long they could in. Could be 3 days, could be a year. To kind of simulate the permanence that they will have on Mars, but they will never be in for 8 years. I promise you all that. In the back over there.
We live in an ecosystem. How many species are we really want?
That's a good question. It's not fully determined yet. We'll bring plants for consumption. We'll probably bring mushrooms and several insects for consumption, algae probably. I don't think we'll bring any pets or livestock other than insects in the first couple of years, but I think that And it's also dependent on how things go. If once there are humans on Mars, anything will happen. And at some point, I believe at some point in time there will be cows on Mars. I mean, why not? Yep.
All right, so I heard somewhere that the plan was to send 2 men, 2 women, each person from a different continent. And I like that idea because it's like the entire world as someone representing them. But I also think that what if the most perfect team was 2 guys from America, a guy from Europe, and a girl from Canada? What if that's
Speaking generally.
Yeah, I just pulled that out of the air. But if the best team wasn't like that, would you try to fit it so it was 1 person from each continent, or would you go with the best team?
Well, the 2 men and 2 women is really a hard requirement for us, so we'll design our teams around that. And we might deviate from the 4 continents, but I would say that we will try very, very hard to make it 4, and otherwise it should be 3. The interesting thing is that there's a lot of science that proves that the more diverse your team, the worse the team is in the short run. So if you need a team that can do a job next week, you need to take 4 guys from the south of the US, or 4 girls from Japan. If you need a team that is at their best after having trained and functioned together for a very long time, then you will find that the best team is actually the most diverse team. So beyond the continents and the 2 different sexes, we will also try to have a broad range of ages in each team, because every type of character, every background, every different personality that you brings you more experience and more problem-solving capabilities. So it's actually very important for Mars 1 for our business plan, but it's also most likely to be the best team. Over there in the back, with the blue, yeah, you, yeah.
So in the Mars 500 tests that were done a while back, there were astronauts selected based on their psychological stability, and that ended with amplified emotions by their own accord, not necessarily in relation to others. And one of the astronauts being sexually assaulted. How do you plan on coping with the somewhat inevitable degrading of their psyche and the amplification of their emotions?
I think the sexual assault was actually a different simulation. Yeah. Or are you sure it was the Mars 500 one?
So, yes.
Okay. Well, what we will do, that's exactly why, this was a simulation, and that's exactly why we will do these simulations, to find out which teams are the best, respond the best to those kinds of conditions. I think that if you are training for a real mission to Mars instead of training for a pretend mission to Mars, then you will be psychologically already more motivated, already more stable, because you're really working towards a goal. Well, everybody knew that this was not a team that might actually go to Mars in 10 years' time. And they were just a couple of guys thrown together to train. Also, the group of people that they were selected from was much smaller than our group of applicants, so we will already have a lot more to choose from. So I believe that first of all we will be able to start off with better teams, and if teams do not perform the way that we expect them to, then they will simply be eliminated from our selection process, and we'll try with a different team. Over there. Yeah.
Am I the only one that thinks that 8 years is an awfully long time? Do you have a good reason for that? It seems to me like people could be in the prime of their life when they apply, and then by the time they finally get to go, they're kind of old and used up.
That's a good question. Well, I do really believe that we need such a long time for training. Don't forget that when you go to Mars, there is no bailout. there's no spare parts coming whenever you need them. So we need to train these people for every single situation that might occur, because if you can't fix a mechanical problem or a medical problem, you're doomed. So we need to make sure that they are really the right teams for the job. It's also finding by training them longer, you will get stability in the teams. I'm wrapping up?
No. I got a question from our chat room for you.
Okay, but I'll finish the
I'm sorry,
first,
please go ahead.
Those are very important reasons to train people for such a long time. And don't forget that there is people who train at NASA or at the European Space Agency to be an astronaut that never fly. That happens all the time. And in the same way, our teams might face that fate. But that doesn't mean that you haven't made a huge contribution, because every mission that trains will help us create a better environment. So we will use the feedback from our teams in training to make our simulation outpost better. So every person training in Mars One is not just training to go to Mars, he's also an employee of Mars One, helping to make this mission possible. Thanks. Yeah, you want to do it?
Nairobi asks, what other major events besides the possible investor that you have coming up are on the horizon for Mars One?
Well, we have very recently announced a request for proposals open for basically any institution in the world to submit one of our experiments. We have a university competition open, so selecting the winning proposals and the winner of the university experiment is going to be extremely exciting. We have a number of partnerships that we are negotiating about that I can't share any details on, but they are going to be extremely exciting. They're worldwide operating companies that have a big impact in the world. So quite a lot of good things happening. I would suggest them to sign up to our newsletter to stay up to date.
We have one more from Heidi. What do you say to people who argue that Mars One is more about ratings and less about picking the best team to go to Mars?
More about what?
More about ratings, I guess, TV ratings. And
well, if you want to be successful in going to Mars, then you need to pick the best team, and there's no alternative. So people think that you need to send very boring people to Mars, because then at least they won't kill each other. But actually the opposite is true. If you are going to be locked up with 3 people, are you going to be locked up, would you prefer to be locked up with 3 boring people or with 3 interesting people? And so being an interesting personality is by definition a selection criterion, because if you're not interesting, then you won't be a right crewmate for the other team members. Yep, over there.
Right.
Yep.
So every expedition that's ever gone out, whether it's to Mount Everest or to the Arctic, or every crew that's ever gone to space, every bridge of every ship, there's always a commander and a pilot, a co-pilot. How do you plan on structuring these teams as far as leadership goes, or is it just going to be an open forum?
It's at this moment most likely that the team will have to come up with these solutions. We can force structures upon them, but once they press the button and leave Earth orbit, there's nothing we can do to enforce whatever we want. So we will, from the start, give the teams complete freedom in deciding on how to operate. And if it turns out that their method is not working, for example, they want a democratic vote when their habitat is exploding, then they're out because they haven't found a good solution for the problem. So it will always be on the teams themselves to come up with the best form of leadership. Yeah, in the back.
What equipment are you planning on using to deliver the 2-ton cargo there? What rocket, what module?
We haven't picked a rocket yet. We're still probably, most probably ask Lockheed Martin to design the landing module, because they are the most experienced company in landing technology on Mars. But the rocket will have to fulfill our requirements, which we don't know yet because we haven't decided the landing module yet. So even for our 2018 mission, it's too early to pick a launcher because it's not fully designed yet. So we'll send out a request for information to different launch entities as soon as we do have those details available. But it will need to be one of the bigger rockets, obviously. Over there in the back.
Let's see, how can I put this? Since you are sending 2 men and 2 women with each mission, and it is a permanent settlement option, what is the plan as far as children arriving on Mars?
That's actually the second most frequently asked question on our website. After can I go? So we're sending 2 men and 2 women not because of procreation reasons. We're sending 2 men and 2 women because there's 50% men and 50% women on this planet. Having babies on Mars is probably going to be a pretty bad idea for a long time. And imagine this environment. It's 250 square meters in size. There's just 4 people there. Imagine a baby crawling around on the floor of your habitat. That's not a good idea.
And crying.
Crying. Don't forget that we scientists don't even know if women can get pregnant in reduced gravity. We don't know how a fetus will develop. Maybe we'll get a really long, thin baby because there's less gravity. On the other hand, the baby's in water inside the womb. So it might not influence, but we don't know it. So there's a lot of tests to be done before anyone should try. So Mars 1 does not have any influence on that, obviously. We won't have any, we'll tell our astronauts not to do this before there has been testing and before there's adequate safety in the outpost. And beyond that, it's really up to the settlers themselves.
Will you have an open applicant so that people can still sign up? For example, they couldn't sign up earlier because, say, I'm under 18. Will I still be able to sign up in the future?
Yeah, we will repeat the selection process at least every other year, and maybe at some point every year, because we will need to have every year additional teams, because teams will drop out, and at some point teams will be leaving to Mars. So we always need fresh teams training to go on their mission. Yeah, so plenty of opportunity. Don't worry. Yeah. I'm sorry, I meant the man with the, yeah, in the front.
Since there are other organizations and groups that are interested in landing on Mars, how would it affect your vision and your plan if one of these groups actually lands successfully before your schedule?
I'm sorry, I have a bad cough. I think at this moment there's not really a private entity planning to land, working on landing something on Mars in 2018. If that will happen, we will applaud it. I mean, the more people working on missions to Mars, the better. Recently I was called 3 times on the same day from the United Emirates, because they announced a private, a government probe going to Mars. I couldn't even find if it was going to be a lander or an orbiter. And I mean, India is on its way to Mars. I think that for Mars exploration goes, the more the merrier. So I hope there will be many working on the same goal. In the back. Yeah, it's actually a really difficult question. What would happen if something goes wrong with the first crew? And even if it's not on the launch pad, but if it's on landing or in the first week. Every exploration comes with risk, and Mars One always wants to be very clear and open about that, because anyone will find out anyway, right? So if I talk to potential partners or potential investors, I always tell them that this is a risky plan, and there is no safe mission to Mars. It doesn't exist. But I think there's two extremely unfortunate moments for things to go wrong. There would be the first unmanned mission, because in the same way that a first successful unmanned mission would generate a lot of positive awareness about Mars One, a first unsuccessful unmanned mission would do the opposite. But the human mission is of course even more dramatic, because not only will we lose a very important mission, but we will also lose a crew and probably friends, because these will be people that will have trained with us, will have been with us for at least 8 years. I think we will either have the plan from the start to send 2 crews in the first year, which is something, if we had $10 billion US instead of $6 billion US available by that time, is something that I would really like to do. But I think it will be extremely difficult to make that happen. If we are planning to send 1 crew, I think there will really be only 1 rocket ready for launch. And yeah, as I said, it would be dramatic from the personal point of view, but I believe it will also be dramatic for our entire mission if something went wrong at that moment. You're very eager, I can see.
So I just have one question. Why do you feel it's appropriate to be going to Mars instead of the Moon?
I think that Robert's actually the right person to answer this question. Don't worry, I'll give the brief version. So the Moon is a nice place to go for a holiday. It's a good place to go for a couple of days, or for a month, or maybe for half a year. But it's not a good place to live, because there's almost no water. There's very limited resources in carbon and nitrogen, and these are all crucial for living off the land. If you go somewhere to stay, you're not going to send your oxygen and your water. Actually, oxygen there is, so you're not going to send your water and other important supplies from Earth all the time. And you could do that for a couple of days, like the Apollo missions did, and you could even do it for a month or half a year, which they do in the International Space Station, but it's not something that you want to do for eternity. Then the Moon, Mars One is designing a mission around solar energy, which is a lot harder on the Moon because of the long night and the long day. The Moon has no atmosphere, whereas Mars has a thin atmosphere which protects against a large portion of the radiation and against micrometeoroids. So these are all technical reasons why Mars is a better place. But there's also actually a financial reason why I believe that even though a mission to the Moon might be cheaper than a mission to Mars, it will be easier for Mars One to raise the higher amount of money for the Mars mission. And that's because if you go to Mars, people are staying, and that engages people. Everyone I talk to gets excited about this, whether they hate the idea or whether they like it. Everybody wants to know more, wants to think about it, and is inspired by it. Whereas the Moon, a lot of people, I think that's a very wrong attitude, but a lot of people feel, been there, done that. So it's much harder to sell a human mission to the Moon than it is to sell a human mission to Mars. Over there.
Gravity. We have data from the space station astronauts being in zero gravity a year and a half or 2 years. Mars, of course, is more like 40% of Earth's gravity, but we're talking about 40 or 50 years. Do you have concerns about long-term health effects, and are there any plans as of now, centrifuges, exercise machines, diet, or other things that will be done specifically to deal with the long-term effects of Martian gravity for folks who are not coming back after 2 years?
Well, of course we have concerns about lower gravity. You can't simulate Martian gravity on Earth because we have 1G and it's impossible to have prolonged periods of Martian gravity. Unless you want to do better studies, but they're not fully, they don't give you all the information. In general, what we see here on Earth is that the human body is very smart. So if I start weightlifting, then I gain bone mass and muscle mass. And then if I stop doing that, because I'm too busy organizing a mission to Mars, then I lose my bone mass and my muscle mass again. The expectations are that the same will happen on Mars, so there will be a new equilibrium, because it's a lightweight planet. There will be a new equilibrium where you will have less bone mass and muscle mass, but there will be an equilibrium. But we can't really determine that until humans go to Mars, so it's something that needs to be found out by trying. And there are a lot of studies going on diets and exercise machines, and Mars will always keep good track of that. We'll provide the settlers on Mars with whatever we can, but we're not planning to develop our own machines. So Mars One is all about using technology that's available already to make this happen. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you tell us how soon we can expect to hear where the various regions are going to be?
You mean for the interviews?
The regions for selecting the finalists and the interviews.
No. No, it's something that you know that we have an agreement with Darlow Smithson Productions to make a documentary around the selection process, and they want to make sure that this is something that we already capture on camera, and that provides us with additional things to arrange before we can actually do that. Go on holiday. Yeah, there in the back. No? Yeah? Yeah.
Are you going to deal with the all of the harmful, poisonous soil, food, consumables? Are you going to recycle that efficiently to last enough time?
Well, the soil, as long as you keep it outside and you're walking around in your spacesuit, it's not in your Mars suit, it's not the biggest problem. But it might be that you want to take soil inside for growing plants. If this will be tested, it would be nice to be able to take soil inside. Not necessary. We can grow many foods hydroponically. But if you want to plant, for instance, an apple tree, then you do really need soil to have the tree grow in. So there will be, we will investigate the use of Martian soil before doing that at a larger scale, and until then we'll make sure that we don't depend on the soil to grow the foods. Thanks. I think it's time to wrap up, right?
That's right. Any final words?
Final words. I love those. No, it's a pleasure to be here again. I'm excited about all your questions. Make sure you stay up to date by subscribing to our newsletter. You can ask us questions through the email address. It's not there, but it's on our website. But you will probably get a reply to read the FAQ. And really a lot of the questions are answered in the FAQ. So if there are more questions, check it out there. And now let's go to Mars.